The bidding for the girl started at $50. In a dirt floor saloon at the edge of nowhere, a circle of rough men shouted numbers, their faces slick with whiskey and greed. At the center of it all stood Roy Cutter, a man with eyes like frozen river stones, and beside him, a young woman with dark hair and a torn dress, her wrists bound tight with rope. She was terrified. You could see it in the way she trembled. 75! A miner yelled from the back. 100! Another hollered. The girl's eyes darted around the room, a trapped animal looking for an escape that wasn't there. Then the saloon doors cracked open, silencing the entire room. A man stood in the doorway, a shadow against the dying light. He was broad-shouldered, wore a long, weathered duster, and his face was hidden by the brim of his hat. He walked in, and every step was like a hammer strike on an anvil. Deliberate, heavy. He didn't say a word. He just reached inside his coat, pulled out a heavy leather pouch, and tossed it onto the table in front of Cutter. Coins spilled out, glinting in the lamplight. 500, the stranger said, his voice low and rough as gravel. Bidding's done. Cutter's smirk faltered for just a second. Well, well, Silas Reeve. Didn't expect to see you down from your mountain. He reached for the coins, but before his fingers could touch them, Silas drew his pistol. The shot was deafening. The whiskey bottle in Cutter's other hand exploded, spraying glass and liquor across the floor. I said, Silas repeated, his voice colder than a Montana winter. Bidding's done. Cutter's eyes narrowed, but the smile never left his face. Always the hero, aren't you, Reeve, even after they stripped that badge off you? The crowd parted like the Red Sea as Silas stepped forward, his hand still on his gun. The girl comes with me. She's paid for. She's yours, Cutter said, scooping up the coins. But remember, Reeve, everything has a price. Silas didn't answer. He just cut the rope from the girl's wrists. Come on, he said quietly. She hesitated for a moment, then followed him out into the night. As the doors swung shut behind them, Cutter called out, his voice dripping with venom. Enjoy your purchase, Marshal. I'm sure she'll be as obedient for you as all the others were for me. Outside, the night was vast and cold. The girl who whispered her name was Mary, shivered in her thin dress. Silas took off his duster and put it around her shoulders. Why? She asked, her voice barely audible. Why did you buy me? Silas looked down at her, his face grim in the moonlight. I didn't buy you, he said. I paid to keep you from them. You're free. He told her she could stay at his cabin in the hills, a safe place until spring. She looked at him, distrust plain in her eyes. And what will you expect in return? Nothing, he said. Just that you tell me everything you know about Roy Cutter and his operation. 2 weeks later, Silas was watching the town of Redemption Creek from a ridge high above. He'd left Mary with a widow 50 miles east, a woman who knew not to ask questions. And Mary had talked. She hadn't known much, but she'd known enough. She told him Cutter was just a middleman, taking orders from someone far more powerful. Someone whose name made even a man like Roy Cutter nervous. Judge Edmund Morris. The name had haunted Silas for years. Morris was the judge who had thrown out the case against Senator Harrow, the man Silas had hunted for months. Harrow ran an organization that had trafficked dozens of women, an organization that had burned Silas's home to the ground with his wife Rebecca and his little girl Sarah trapped inside. The memory was a physical weight pressing down on him. The inquiry, Judge Morris presiding with that same thin smile, had stripped Silas of his badge, calling him a vengeful liar. For 3 years, Silas had been gathering evidence, tracking them from his isolated cabin in the mountains. And now, thanks to Mary, he had his first real lead in a long time. Mary had told him about a man named Thomas Hayes, a poor farmer drowning in debt to Cutter. And tonight, Cutter was coming to collect. The payment wasn't going to be in cash. It was going to be the farmer's own daughter, Lydia. As the sun burned away the morning mist, Silas rode down toward the Hayes farm. It looked abandoned, the fields fallow, the fences broken. Through a cracked window, he saw a young woman sweeping the floor. She moved with a strange, pronounced limp. This had to be Lydia Hayes. He watched all day. He saw her father, Thomas, stumble out of the house, drunk and wild-eyed. He saw her brother, Caleb, who spoke to her quietly and helped her carry firewood. But there was a strange watchfulness in his eyes that Silas couldn't place. As dusk settled, 3 riders appeared on the road. It was Roy Cutter. "Evening, Thomas," Cutter called, dismounting. "Time's up." Thomas paled. "I just need more time." "You've had 6 months," Cutter said, his voice hard as iron. "Where is she?" Before Thomas could answer, the door opened and Lydia stepped onto the porch, her limp seeming even worse than before. "I'm here," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. Cutter looked her up and down like livestock. "Still hobbling, I see. No matter. My client doesn't need her to dance." He turned back to Thomas. 3 days. I'll be back with the payment. Have her ready." As they turned to leave, Caleb stepped out from the barn, his hand resting near the pistol hidden under his shirt. "Hold on," he called. "I want to make sure my sister's going somewhere decent." Cutter just laughed. "Don't you worry, Caleb. Your sister will be well looked after." The cold fury in Caleb's eyes surprised Silas. This wasn't a brother giving up. This was something else entirely. After Cutter rode away, Silas knew what he had to do. He had 3 days to stop another girl from disappearing into Judge Morris's network. He had to become a buyer. The next morning, Silas rode right up to the Hayes farm. Thomas was outside, looking haggard and broken. "Name's Silas Reeve," Silas said, dismounting. "I heard you might be selling something I'm interested in." Thomas's face went white. "Who told you that?" "Word travels," Silas said. "I understand Roy Cutter's arranged to purchase your daughter. I'm offering more. Double whatever he's paying." Greed flickered in the broken man's eyes. Just then, the farmhouse door opened and Lydia stepped out. "He's offering to buy your contract from Cutter," Thomas explained, a hint of hope in his voice. "And you're considering it," she said, her voice flat. Her eyes, full of a hidden fire, never left Silas's face. "So I'm worth more to this stranger than to my own father," Lydia said, her words cutting like a razor. "Good to know the price." Silas addressed her directly. "Miss Hayes, I'm offering an alternative." "An alternative to being sold to Cutter?" she asked. "What's your alternative? That I belong to you instead?" "No," Silas said firmly. "That you belong to no one." Before she could respond, they heard hoofbeats. It was Cutter, and this time he had 4 men with him. "Well, well," Cutter called, his eyes narrowing on Silas. "The disgraced marshal trying to poach my merchandise." He turned to Silas. "How much did you offer him?" "Double your price," Silas said. Cutter let out a low whistle. She must be special indeed. He looked at Lydia as if seeing her for the first time. "Makes me wonder if I've undervalued her." "Name your price, Cutter," Silas said. "Let's end this." A slow, cruel smile spread across Cutter's face. 500. Cash. Today. Thomas gasped, but Lydia's face remained a mask. Silas reached into his coat, pulled out the same leather pouch, and tossed it to Cutter. 500. She comes with me now. Cutter caught the pouch. "She's yours." He tipped his hat mockingly at Lydia. As he rode away, he paused beside Silas. "Enjoy your purchase, Reeve," he said, his voice a low threat. "But remember, I know where you live. That cabin of yours isn't as isolated as you think." Silas didn't respond. He just looked at Lydia. "Get your things," he told her. "We leave in 10 minutes." As Lydia went inside, her brother Caleb emerged from the barn, leading a saddled horse. His face was a mask of controlled rage. "You're just letting her go?" he demanded of his father. "The debt's paid, Caleb," Thomas said wearily. "We keep the farm." Caleb turned to Silas. "What kind of man buys a woman?" "The kind who keeps her from worse men," Silas replied. Something passed between the 2 men, an unspoken understanding. Caleb's eyes narrowed, and then he gave a nearly imperceptible nod. He called to Lydia, who came out with a small bundle. He helped her mount the horse, his hands gentle. Then he pressed something small into her hand. A knife. "Just in case," he whispered. Silas mounted his own horse. "We'll head north through Elk Pass," he said, loud enough for Cutter's men, who were watching from a nearby ridge, to hear. Then, more quietly to Caleb, he said, "Not really. We'll double back east at the creek." Understanding flashed in Caleb's eyes. As they rode away, Lydia finally spoke. "Why did you do it? Why pay so much?" Silas looked at her, at the steel hidden deep in her eyes. "You're not the first girl he's sold," he said. "But if I succeed, you'll be the last." Her eyes widened. "You're not taking me to a cabin, are you? You're using me as bait." The directness of her question surprised him. "Not bait," he corrected. "A witness, someone who can testify against the men he works for." "And what happens to me afterward?" "Whatever you want," Silas promised. "You'll be free." As they made camp that night, Silas noticed something strange. When Lydia thought he wasn't looking, her limp seemed to vanish. Her movements were fluid, graceful, until she caught his eye, and the awkward gait returned. Later, sitting by the fire, he asked her directly, "Your leg, it's not really lame, is it?" Fear flashed in her eyes, then defiance. "What are you talking about?" "When you think I'm not watching, you move differently," Silas said. "The limp disappears." She was silent for a long time. "It was my mother's idea," she finally said. "She said if they thought I was broken, they'd leave me alone. Men like Cutter." A bitter smile touched her lips. "It worked. For a while. Until you decided I was worth $500, limp and all." The accusation hung in the air between them. Silas had no answer for it. Just before dawn, Silas jerked awake. His instincts, honed by years as a marshal, screamed that something was wrong. Across the fire, Lydia was already sitting up, her eyes wide. "Someone's out there," she whispered. From the ridge above their camp, there was a soft click, the sound of a rifle being cocked. "That's far enough, Reeve," a familiar voice called out. It was Cutter. "Send out the girl and maybe I'll let you live." Silas didn't bother to respond. He signaled for Lydia to move toward a thicket of pines. "I've got 6 men with me, Reeve!" Cutter shouted. "Even you can't outshoot those odds!" A rifle shot cracked through the air, dirt exploding near Silas's feet. "You've got until I count to 5! 1!" Lydia was in the trees. 2! Silas untied the horses. 3! He slapped Lydia's horse on the rump, sending it galloping down the trail as a diversion. 4! He mounted his own horse, wheeling toward the pines where Lydia was hiding. 5! Silas fired 3 quick shots toward the ridge, not to hit, but to make them duck. In that split second of confusion, he charged into the trees, leaned down, and pulled Lydia up behind him. Gunfire erupted as they crashed through the underbrush, the horse surging forward, fleeing deeper into the forest. They rode hard, finally reaching the high country where they could see Silas's cabin nestled on a small plateau below. Smoke curled from the chimney. "Someone's there," Lydia said, her voice full of alarm. "A friend," Silas assured her. "Someone I trust." As they approached, the door opened and a man stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and had a U.S. Marshal's badge pinned to his vest. "You're late," the man called. "Was starting to think Cutter got you." "Nearly did," Silas said, dismounting. "Jacob, this is Lydia Hayes. Lydia, this is Deputy U.S. Marshal Jacob Blackwood." Lydia's eyes widened. "You're working with the law?" "The parts that aren't corrupt," Silas replied grimly. Inside, Blackwood explained that he'd been gathering evidence on Judge Morris for months. He was one of the few who believed Silas about Senator Harrow. "Silas, we should talk," Blackwood said, his face grave, "about what happened in Redemption Creek last week." "What happened?" Lydia insisted. The 2 men exchanged a look. "Cutter's men killed a girl," Silas said bluntly. "Mary Williams, the one I rescued from the saloon. They found her at the widow's farm." The blood drained from Lydia's face. "Because she talked to me," Silas said. "She told me about a ledger. Cutter keeps a record of every transaction, every girl sold, every buyer, every price, names, dates, enough to hang Judge Morris and half the territorial government." "Then that's what you need," Lydia said. "Not me. The ledger." "Exactly." Blackwood agreed. But he's careful. He never leaves himself vulnerable. Except, Silas added, his eyes meeting Lydia's, when he's making a major transaction, like acquiring a new girl for a special client. Understanding dawned on Lydia's face. That's why you bought me, to draw him out. It was the plan, Silas admitted. Then the plan is still good, Lydia said, her voice filled with a sudden, shocking resolve. He'll come after me again, and when he does, you'll be ready. Before Silas could argue, the cabin door burst open. A young man staggered in, his shirt soaked in blood, a bullet wound in his shoulder. Caleb! Lydia cried, rushing forward without a trace of her limp. Her brother collapsed into her arms, his face gray with pain. They're coming, he gasped. Cutter knows about this cabin. They're coming tonight. As they laid Caleb on the table, Lydia tearing strips from her skirt for bandages, Silas's mind was racing. How? He demanded. His men caught me following them, Caleb managed to say. Been tracking his operation for months. Silas and Blackwood exchanged a look. You're not just a concerned brother, are you? Caleb attempted a grim smile. Deputy U.S. Marshal Caleb Hayes, he admitted. Undercover. Lydia's hands froze. What? Sorry, Lyd, Caleb whispered. Couldn't tell you. Needed your reactions to be genuine. It would have blown my cover. I was so close to getting the ledger. The shock on Lydia's face slowly transformed into a cold, hard anger. All those years watching her father sell off their lives piece by piece, watching him prepare to sell her, and her brother knew. Her brother was the law. They'll be here in a few hours, Caleb gasped. Jacob, you have to go, Silas said urgently. Take the evidence to Fort Benton. If we don't make it, the truth has to. Blackwood protested, but Lydia agreed. He's right. Someone needs to get out. After Blackwood rode off into the dusk, the three of them prepared for a siege. Lydia picked up a shotgun. Show me how to use this, she said to Silas. There was no fear in her voice, only resolve. As they worked, Silas finally learned the truth he'd been seeking for 3 long years. He told Lydia how his investigation into Senator Harrow had led to his wife and daughter being murdered. The investigation was taken over by Judge Morris, Silas said, his voice low and dead. He ruled there wasn't enough evidence. I was discharged, disgraced. And now Cutter is coming to silence us all, Caleb said grimly from the doorway. They set traps around the cabin, tripwires and pits. As they worked, Lydia told Silas about her mother. She hadn't just taught Lydia to fake the limp. She had been one of Cutter's victims years ago, before she'd escaped. She knew what these men were. She said if I seemed damaged, I'd be less valuable, Lydia explained, less likely to be taken. There comes a time when hiding weakens you more than it protects you, Silas told her. Is that why you came down from your mountain? Lydia asked. To stop hiding? Maybe, he admitted. Or maybe I just got tired of letting men like Morris win. They waited. The hours crawled by. Then, a distant snap echoed through the night. One of the traps. They're here, Silas whispered. In the moonlight they could see at least 8 men spreading out to surround the cabin. Reeve, a voice called from the darkness. It was Cutter. Send out the girl and her brother, and maybe we'll let you live. Go to hell, Cutter, Silas shouted back. The world exploded in gunfire. Bullets thudded into the cabin walls. They held their fire, waiting for the rush. It came moments later. 4 men charged the front door. Silas and Caleb dropped 2 of them. A face appeared in the window, and Lydia pulled the trigger on the shotgun. The blast shattered glass and flesh. The attack was relentless. Flaming arrows began to thud into the roof. They're trying to smoke us out, Silas yelled. Lydia, without a word, grabbed a bucket of water and scrambled up into the narrow attic space to douse the flames. Below, Silas and Caleb kept up a steady fire, but Caleb was fading, his wound reopening. A tremendous crash shook the door as Cutter's men used a battering ram. The bar holding it was splintering. That door won't last, Silas said. Lydia dropped back down from the attic, her face black with soot. We can't outrun them with Caleb wounded, she said, her voice firm. We need another way. There was a look in her eyes Silas had never seen before. Not fear. Calculation. "Cutter wants me," she said. "He thinks I know about the ledger. What if I let him catch me?" "Absolutely not," Caleb snapped. Another crash. The door was about to give way. "Listen to me," Lydia insisted. "If I surrender, I can claim I'll show him where the ledger is. It will buy you time to escape through the tunnel, get to Fort Benton, bring back an army." "We are not using you as bait!" Silas yelled. "I'm volunteering," she shot back. "I've spent my whole life pretending to be weak. It's time I used that to our advantage." Before they could stop her, she threw open the window. "Cutter, stop! I'm coming out!" The gunfire stopped. "The moment they focus on me," she whispered fiercely to Silas and Caleb, "you two head for the tunnel." She squeezed her brother's hand. "Trust me." With that, she resumed her false limp and walked toward the door. Silas moved beside her. "I'm going with you." "No, they'll kill you immediately." "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe I can create enough confusion for you to get away." The final blow came. The door burst inward. In that split second of chaos, Silas made his choice. He shoved Lydia hard toward Caleb. "Tunnel, now!" he roared, and then he charged through the broken doorway and into the night. It was a suicide run. Gunfire erupted all around him. He rolled behind a woodpile, firing back, drawing all their attention. He saw Caleb dragging a protesting Lydia toward the hidden trap door, and then he heard a sound that turned his blood to ice. Lydia's scream. He turned to see two of Cutter's men dragging her out of the cabin. Caleb lay motionless on the floor. "No!" Silas roared, breaking cover. A bullet slammed into his leg, and he went down. He tried to get up, to reach her, but a heavy boot pinned him to the ground. He looked up into the smiling face of Roy Cutter. "You never did know when to quit, Marshal," Cutter said, aiming his pistol at Silas's head. "Let her go," Silas gritted out. "She knows nothing." "Maybe not," Cutter laughed. "But her brother does. Imagine my surprise when I found a U.S. Marshal's badge in his saddlebag." He then turned to Lydia. "Don't worry, Miss Hayes. First, you're going to tell me what you know about my ledger," Cutter taunted Silas. "Always fighting for lost causes, aren't you, Reeve? First your wife and daughter, now this girl." At the mention of his family, something cold and hard snapped inside Silas. "You know about Rebecca and Sarah?" he asked, stalling, his hand inching toward the small derringer hidden in his boot. Cutter's smile was thin and cruel. "Of course I do. Who do you think carried out Harrow's orders that night? It wasn't personal, Reeve. Just business." With a roar of pure rage, Silas lunged, the hidden gun in his hand. The derringer fired point blank into Cutter's thigh. Cutter screamed and staggered back. In that moment of chaos, Lydia acted. She went limp in her captor's arms, then exploded into motion, driving her knee into one man's groin and grabbing the other's pistol. A shot rang out, and she was sprinting for the trees, her powerful stride eating up the ground, no trace of a limp to be seen. "After her!" Cutter bellowed, clutching his bleeding leg. Half his men took off in pursuit. The others turned on Silas. From inside the cabin, the wounded Caleb rejoined the fight, but it was hopeless. A dozen more riders emerged from the forest. Reinforcements. Silas fired his last round. Silence fell. Cutter limped forward, his face twisted with rage. "Drop your weapons!" he ordered. They dragged Silas and a badly wounded Caleb out of the cabin. "Where's the girl?" Cutter demanded. "Gone," Silas said with grim satisfaction. "You'll never find her." Cutter smiled. "Oh, we'll find her. And when we do, you'll both watch each other die." He turned to his men. "Take them to the wagon. Judge Morris is expecting a delivery." As they were led away, Silas looked back at his burning cabin, the last remnant of his old life. Somewhere in the darkness, Lydia was running, hunted, alone, but free. And she was their only hope. Lydia ran. The forest was a nightmare of grasping branches and tangled roots, but she didn't stop. Behind her, she could hear Cutter's men crashing through the underbrush, their shouts echoing in the thin mountain air. She had seen Silas and Caleb captured. There was nothing she could do for them now but survive. Years of hard farm labor had made her strong, and the freedom of running without her fake limp gave her a speed her pursuers never expected. By dawn, the sounds of the chase had faded. She was alone, shivering and exhausted, but alive. She had a pistol with 4 bullets, no food, no horse. Fort Benton was days away on foot. As she pushed eastward, her mind raced. Caleb was a U.S. Marshal. Silas was driven by the murder of his family, and it all led back to one man, Judge Edmund Morris. He wasn't just a corrupt judge, he was running a massive human trafficking operation across the entire territory. The thought hardened something inside her. This was no longer just about saving Silas and Caleb, it was about justice for every woman who hadn't escaped. Late that afternoon, starving and desperate, she saw a plume of smoke from a small ranch in the valley below. It was a risk, but she had no choice. She crept toward the barn, hoping to steal a horse. "That's far enough, miss." The voice came from behind her, along with the click of a rifle hammer. Lydia froze. She turned to see an old man, his face a road map of wrinkles, the rifle in his hands rock steady. "Please," she said, "I'm not here for trouble." "Men after you?" the old man asked, his eyes sharp. "Cutter's men?" Lydia was stunned. "Yes. How did you know?" "They rode through this morning," he said, lowering the rifle slightly. "Asking about a young woman. Offered a reward. Didn't like the look of 'em, so I sent 'em north." Relief washed over her. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet," he said, studying her. "You're Thomas Hayes's girl, ain't you? The one they say is crippled." "I was," Lydia said. "Heard he sold you to Cutter," the old man said. "Not to Cutter," Lydia corrected. "To Silas Reeve." The old man's eyebrows shot up. "Reeve? The mountain man?" He let out a low whistle. "Now that's interesting. Come on in, girl. Reckon you better tell me the whole story." Inside the cabin, the old man, who called himself Ezekiel Morgan, listened as Lydia told him everything. When she was done, he sat in silence, stroking his long white beard. "And you think they've taken Reeve and your brother to Judge Morris," he said finally. "That's what Cutter said." "Then you're going the wrong way," Morgan said. "Fort Benton's 3 days' ride. By the time you get back with help, your friends will be dead." Lydia's heart sank. "Then what do I do?" "Morris doesn't operate out of Fort Benton," Morgan said, a strange light in his old eyes. "He holds court in Helena this time of year, but he lives on a private estate outside town, heavily guarded. That's where they'll be." "That's even farther. Not the way I know," Morgan said. "There's an old prospector's trail through the mountains. Cuts the journey to a day and a half. I can show you." Hope, sharp and sudden, flared in Lydia's chest. "Why? Why would you help me?" Ezekiel Morgan's eyes darkened with a pain that was decades old. "Because 20 years ago," he said, his voice a low growl, "my daughter disappeared. Last I heard, she'd been sold to a mining camp up near the Canadian border." He stood up, his decision made. "Get some rest. We leave at first light." As Lydia lay on the small cot, her mind raced. A farm girl against a corrupt judge and his entire criminal network. It was impossible. But then she remembered Silas's words. "There comes a time when hiding weakens you more than it protects you." She was done hiding. Tomorrow, she would ride for Helena. The trail was treacherous, a ghost of a path clinging to the side of the mountain, but Ezekiel Morgan rode like he was born in the saddle. By late afternoon, they could see Helena sprawling in the valley below, and on a hill overlooking the town, a grand, imposing mansion. "That's it," Morgan said. "Morris's estate." Even from a distance, Lydia could see armed guards patrolling the grounds. "How do we get in?" she asked. "Not we," Morgan corrected. "You. Morris doesn't know your face. He's holding a big reception tomorrow night for all the important men in the territory. The place will be crawling with politicians and bankers." He looked at her, a strange glint in his eye. "And they'll need extra help in the kitchen." The next day, Lydia was scrubbing pots in the chaotic kitchen of the Helena Grand Hotel. Just as Morgan had predicted, Judge Morris's stern housekeeper, a Mrs. Carver, arrived looking for extra serving girls for the reception. Lydia, keeping her eyes downcast and her posture meek, was hired on the spot. Morgan met her in an alley behind the hotel. It worked, she whispered. Good, he said grimly, pressing a small, sharp knife into her hand. Remember the plan. Locate Reeve and your brother. Don't do anything until you know where they are. He pointed to an old, abandoned mill on a hill east of the estate. I'll be waiting there. 3 flashes from a lantern if you need me. The Morris mansion was even more opulent and corrupt than she could have imagined. As Lydia circulated through the ballroom with a tray of champagne, she saw him, Judge Edmund Morris, a man of distinguished silver hair and cold blue eyes holding court. She listened, her ears straining, and then she heard a voice that made her blood run cold. Roy Cutter. He was standing by the fireplace, his leg bandaged, but otherwise dressed in a fine suit, laughing with a group of wealthy men. I hear you brought something special for the judge's private collection, one of the men said. Cutter smiled. A former U.S. Marshal with delusions of grandeur. Morris has wanted him silenced for years. And the other one? Insurance, Cutter replied. And bait. The sister is still out there. Morris has planned a little demonstration for some of us after the party. Lydia's hand trembled. They were here, in this house. And Morris was planning to kill them tonight. She had to find them. The second floor was guarded. That left the cellar. She found the door at the back of the kitchen, flanked by 2 armed men. Getting past them would be impossible. She needed a diversion. As Judge Morris was giving a grand speech in the ballroom, Lydia slipped back into the kitchen. She accidentally knocked a large bottle of cooking oil onto a hot stove. Flames erupted. Fire! She screamed. In the chaos, as servants shouted and the guards rushed from their post, Lydia slipped through the cellar door and down the dark stone steps. The air was cold and damp. She checked the heavy doors along the corridor. Locked. Locked. Then, at the third door, she heard a faint sound from within. Silas? She whispered. Caleb? A hoarse voice came back. Lydia? Caleb, I'm here to get you out. Lydia, run! He rasped. It's a trap! They knew you'd come! Heavy footsteps echoed on the stairs behind her. She spun around, reaching for the knife in her boot. But she was too late. Roy Cutter stood there, a pistol aimed right at her heart. Miss Hayes, he said with a smooth, terrible smile. Right on schedule. Behind him, Judge Morris appeared, his face a mask of cold amusement. So this is the girl who's caused so much trouble? He looked her up and down. She doesn't look like much. Appearances can be deceiving, Your Honor, Cutter replied, his eyes never leaving Lydia. They dragged her down the corridor to a final door, which opened into a large circular chamber. What she saw inside made her blood run cold. It was a private arena, a theater of pain, with chairs set up for spectators. Chained to opposite walls were Silas and Caleb. They had been brutally beaten. Lydia! Silas rasped when he saw her. No? How touching, Morris said with a thin smile. Chain her beside him. Our guests will be arriving momentarily. As they shackled Lydia to the wall, Silas leaned as close as he could. Why did you come back? He whispered, anguish in his voice. Same reason you came down from your mountain, she replied, her voice steady. I couldn't let them win. The door opened, and the wealthy, powerful men from the party filed in, their faces flushed with champagne and dark anticipation. They took their seats. Gentlemen, Morris announced, taking center stage, tonight we address a threat to our enterprises. The punishment for such interference must be instructive. He nodded to Cutter, who stepped forward, drawing a long, wicked-looking knife. Been waiting a long time for this, Reeve, Cutter sneered, pressing the blade to Silas's throat. Wait, Morris interrupted. Perhaps we should begin with the young lady. Make the marshal watch. Cutter's smile widened as he turned toward Lydia. As he approached, Silas strained against his chains, roaring with helpless fury. You won't win, Lydia said quietly, her eyes locked on Cutter's. Others know what you've done. Cutter just laughed. No one with proof. You mean like the ledger? Lydia asked, playing her only card. The one recording every name, every victim? The room fell silent. Morris stepped forward sharply. What do you know of the ledger? Everything, Lydia bluffed, her heart pounding. Including where it is now. If anything happens to us, it goes straight to the territorial governor. Doubt flickered across Morris's face. A clever attempt, Miss Hayes, he said finally, but ultimately futile. He turned to his audience. Gentlemen, it seems our entertainment will be delayed briefly while we extract some information. As the men filed out, Morris gave his final order to Cutter. Get the location, then kill them all. Cutter turned back to Lydia, the knife glinting. Now then, Miss Hayes, where shall we begin? She doesn't know anything, Cutter, Silas yelled desperately. The ledger exists, a weak voice called from across the room. It was Caleb. But she doesn't know where it is. Then who does? Cutter demanded, whirling toward him. I do. The voice came from the open doorway. Cutter spun around to see Ezekiel Morgan standing there, his old rifle raised and steady. Before Cutter could even react, the rifle boomed. The bullet slammed into Cutter's shoulder, spinning him around. Morgan moved with surprising speed, unlocking Lydia's chains with a set of keys he'd taken from a guard upstairs. The kitchen fire was a nice touch, he said. He handed her Cutter's fallen knife. Free Reeve. I'll get your brother. As Lydia worked on Silas's shackles, a volley of gunshots echoed from the floor above. Morgan paused. That'll be Blackwood and his men, he said with satisfaction. Met him on the road this morning. Man rides like the devil's chasing him. The cavalry had arrived. The door to the chamber burst open, but it was two of Morris's guards. Morgan dropped one. Silas, now free, tackled the other, slamming his head against the stone floor. On the ground, Cutter groaned, stirring. The ledger, Cutter, Silas demanded, limping toward him. Where is it? You'll never. Cutter coughed, blood on his lips, his eyes darting toward a torch bracket on the wall. Hidden compartment, behind the third torch. Lydia rushed to the spot, found a loose stone, and pulled out a leather-bound book. Got it. We need to find Morris, Silas ordered. They burst out of the cellar into chaos. U.S. Marshals were fighting guards in the main hall. They found Deputy Blackwood in the foyer. Silas, thank God! Morris, Silas gasped. Trying to escape through the back conservatory, Blackwood yelled. He's armed and desperate. I'm finishing this, Silas said, his voice raw with 3 years of pain. He started for the back of the house, his wounded leg screaming in protest. Not alone, Lydia said, supporting him. They found him in the glass conservatory, a shadowy figure near the garden door. Give it up, Morris! Silas called out. Nothing is finished until I say it is! Morris shouted back, firing a shot that shattered the glass near their heads. We have the ledger! Silas yelled. Your friends will abandon you! My friends are governors and senators, Morris sneered. They need what I provide. He began to taunt Silas, his voice dripping with venom, telling him how his wife Rebecca had begged for her life, and for the life of their daughter. It was a distraction. As Morris spoke, he was backing toward the garden door. But he hadn't accounted for Lydia. While Silas kept him talking, she slipped away, moving like a shadow through the exotic plants. Business, Reeve, Morris was saying as he reached for the door handle. Just business. Nothing personal. This is, a voice said from directly behind him. Morris whirled around, his pistol rising, but Lydia was faster. The knife plunged into his shoulder, and he dropped the gun with a scream of pain. Silas emerged from cover, his own pistol aimed steadily at Morris's heart. For 3 years, Silas had dreamed of this moment. Vengeance was just a pull of the trigger away. Silas, Lydia said softly. He deserves to hang, publicly, after everyone knows what he's done. The fire in Silas's eyes cooled. He slowly lowered the pistol. You're right. Death is too quick for him. At that moment, Morris lunged, a tiny derringer appearing from his sleeve. Before he could aim, Lydia kicked his legs out from under him. He crashed to the floor as Blackwood and 2 deputies burst in. Judge Edmund Morris, Blackwood announced. You're under arrest. As they were hauling Morris away, Lydia leaned against Silas, exhaustion finally washing over her. Is it really over? Silas looked down at the woman who had faced down monsters, his voice quiet. Morris's part is. But there'll be others. And we'll stop them too, she said with a simple, unshakable certainty. The next morning, as a doctor tended to Silas's wounds, Deputy Blackwood came to their hotel room with a piece of news that changed everything. Morris was singing like a canary, Blackwood said, his face grim. Trying to cut a deal. He claims Senator Harrow, the man who ordered your family's murder, faked his death last year. The air in the room went cold. He says Harrow is alive, Blackwood continued, living under an assumed name in a mansion in San Francisco. Silas was on his feet, ignoring the searing pain in his leg. The hunt wasn't over. The man who started it all, the final ghost, was still out there. I'm coming with you, Silas said, his voice dangerously soft. Then I'm coming too, Lydia stated, leaving no room for argument. The train thundered westward, carrying them toward a final confrontation 3 years in the making. They arrived in San Francisco to find the city shrouded in fog. The local marshals had Harrow's mansion on Nob Hill under surveillance. The plan was a simple, by-the-book arrest, but Silas knew nothing involving William Harrow was ever simple. That night, as the marshals converged on the house, all hell broke loose. It was an ambush. Gunfire erupted from the windows. A deputy went down. Harrow knew they were coming. While Blackwood and his men were pinned down in a firefight, Silas saw his chance. He and Lydia slipped in through a side entrance. They fought their way up through the house, silencing Harrow's hired guns. They found him in his third-floor study, a silver-haired aristocrat calmly packing a satchel. "Marshal Reeve," Harrow greeted him, a thin, arrogant smile on his face. "I heard they took your badge." "They gave it back," Silas said, advancing into the room. "Just in time for me to arrest you for the murder of my wife and daughter." "Unfortunate business," Harrow said coolly. "Nothing personal." He glanced at Lydia. "Who's your companion? Another of Morris's discards?" "Look at me," Silas growled. "Morris is in federal custody. Your entire operation is finished." For the first time, a flicker of surprise crossed Harrow's face. Then it was gone, replaced by pure arrogance. "It doesn't matter. There will always be men like me." "On your knees," Silas ordered. Harrow sighed as if bored, and then he moved. He lunged for a hidden derringer in his desk drawer. Silas fired twice. The bullets threw Harrow back against the wall. He slid to the floor, a look of genuine shock on his face. "You've killed me!" "Yes," Silas said, standing over the man who had destroyed his life. He had expected to feel triumph, closure. Instead, he just felt empty. "Is it finished now?" Lydia asked softly. Footsteps pounded in the hall and Blackwood burst in. "Damn it, Silas, what happened?" "He drew on me," Silas said, and in that moment it was true enough. The last piece of the network was gone. 2 days later, they stood on the train platform, ready to return to Montana. Blackwood handed Silas a telegram. It was his official reinstatement. "Congratulations, Marshal," Blackwood said. Silas looked at the paper, then at Lydia. "My farm's not far from Helena," she said quietly. "It's a hard life," Silas warned, "being a marshal's partner." A small, genuine smile touched her lips. "I'm not afraid of hard," she reminded him. "Never have been." The train whistle blew. He offered his arm. She took it. Together they boarded the eastbound train, heading toward the rising sun and the waiting mountains of home. When they returned, Judge Morris's trial was swift. Guilty on all counts, sentenced to hang. The city of Helena, once shrouded in his corruption, felt like it could breathe again. The governor held a ceremony, honoring them as heroes. Silas officially accepted his reinstatement on one condition. He would rebuild his cabin. He needed the mountains to remember what mattered. "Truth," he told Lydia later, as they stood on a hill overlooking the town. "Justice, not vengeance." He looked at her, the woman who had fought beside him, who had saved him in more ways than one. "And people worth protecting." Lydia met his gaze, her own eyes clear and strong. She had confronted her own ghost, her father, who had come to Helena, sober and full of shame. She hadn't forgiven him, not yet, but she had faced him. She was no longer hiding. They rode out of Helena together. Ahead of them lay her farm, which was hers now, free and clear. And beyond it, in the high country, a cabin that needed rebuilding, a future that was unwritten, a home they would make together. The story of Silas and Lydia shows that even in the darkest of times, courage can bring the most powerful evils to light. If you enjoyed this story of justice in the Old West, make sure you hit that subscribe button and don't forget to turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video.